Welcome back, everyone, to Vox Markets. My name is Paul Hill. I'm delighted again to be able to speak to Adam Hill, CEO of Oncimmune, a global immunodiagnostics firm with a leading position in autoimmune profiling. So welcome, Adam.
Good to see you again, Paul.
Yeah, well, lots been happening since we last spoke back in November, not least obviously Ukraine and Russia, but we'll park that one. So big congrats on the positive contract announcements and today's interims as well. But before we sort of dig into the detail, I don't suppose you could quickly remind investors of the typical application usages of ImmunoINSIGHTS, perhaps using an illustration, the world's largest oncology firm, which I know is probably your biggest customer.
Absolutely. We, as you know, are in the business of delivering autoantibody profiling to pharmaceutical customers. We are world expert in the use of autoantibodies to detect changes in immune response, either to disease or to the treatment of that disease. The way in which we deliver that scientific expertise is through a series of tools. SeroTag is our high throughput discovery tool, so we can rapidly identify binding events between antigens and antibodies using our proprietary library of antigens, or immunogenic proteins, as some might refer to them as. Our Navigate panels, which are tailorable panels in disease domains, which improve the statistical tools or the power of those statistical tools that we're able to use in performing analyses on behalf of our pharmaceutical customers. And then a series of bioinformatics tools that really allow us to interpret the data that we create through analyzing these blood samples and derive some plausible biological hypotheses. And that's very much the value add. If you were to talk to our largest customer, I think they would say, first and foremost, that Oncimmune has an unparalleled bioinformatics capability that is able to give us serious insight into the binding events that can be analyzed and mapped using their SeroTag and Navigate technologies. That large customer, we currently have 5 programs in flight with. They will represent a substantial portion, but less than 50% of our revenue in this year. And you'll be glad to know that, of course, they are joined by 12 other customers. We have more than doubled our customer base in the last 12 months. And indeed, at least 3 of those customers to date, we have multiple programs in flight with, and there's another 4 that we are in the process of contracting for multiple programs. And so it's by no means reliant upon that large customer, but nonetheless, that large customer has been tremendously influential in the development of our platform capability.
And is that sort of the background rationale for the company's strategy to expand into the sort of the world's 10 biggest biopharma? Is that sort of landed using that as a sort of a case study, as a reference site? Is that, once they see the value of the ImmunoINSIGHTS platform, they'll keep coming back to it because it gives them something that they can't get anywhere else?
Yeah, that's right. And look, we have now absolutely penetrated the top 10 global pharmaceutical companies. That this year will represent about 70% of revenue. The market that they themselves create in outhoused bioanalytical services is worth about $2.3 billion US. Of that, autoantibodies is substantially smaller. It's about 100 million UK, but importantly, growing at 27%, outstripping the growth in that $2.3 billion dollar number that I mentioned earlier. So our segment of this market, servicing the large pharmaceutical companies, is really growing very, very fast. But it's important to also state that there is a market beyond global pharmaceutical companies in both biotechs and also academic institutions. And we have for a year or more now, had a very strong relationship with Cedars-Sinai, Dana-Farber. We've also announced recent relationships with, and there's 2 or 3 other academic health science centers in the US that we are now collaborating with and will be announcing shortly. But to go to, I think that the core of your question is our future predicated on building strong relationships with these pharmaceutical companies, global pharmaceutical companies? Absolutely. It is far easier, of course, to upsell an existing relationship on the back of delivering high quality outputs into a customer than, of course, it is to win the first piece of work. And so we have a very active account management program. And as you can imagine, from a German-based bioanalytics company such as we are, the quality of work that we deliver is really world-class.
Mm. Well, that seems to have certainly been reflected in your today's interims. Can you just quickly talk through sort of the quarterly progression in the in sort of contracts and pipeline momentum, and also sort of H1 H2 split for ImmunoINSIGHTS, because it seems to be going from strength to strength.
I mean, it really is. I think across industries, and certainly we felt it within our own. The beginning of our financial year, the summer period, was a little slow as everyone had that well-needed break that we all experienced after 2 years in lockdown throughout a pandemic. And since Q2, Q3, and now entering into Q4 as of tomorrow, the order book continues to grow, and the number of contracts that we're signing is really accelerating fast. It's worth bearing in mind, though, Paul, that of course, we built this business in a pandemic. Very much, I mean, as soon as we launched our first customer, a month and a half later, we were into lockdown, and so we have not only prospected, originated, but also won work and delivered work to customers that we've never met face to face. And that tells you 2 things, really. That, of course, there is a high quality of engagement and output that allows us to build those relationships virtually. But also there's a tremendous amount of upside when of course we are eventually allowed to go and see these customers face to face. And I'm delighted to say that, of course, over the last month or so, many of these global pharmaceutical companies have been allowing people in through their front door to have face-to-face meetings without masks. And so we are seeing a substantial surge in interest and activity, very much by virtue of the fact that we're seeing people face to face for the first time.
And have you got enough sort of feet on the street now? Because I know you were going through a period of recruitment, and so are there enough sort of salesmen to be able to handle all of these new inquiries?
It's a great question, and you'll remember that March last year we did a fundraise at a premium. Oversubscribed fundraise at the time, and that allowed us to do 2 things, really. It allowed us to increase the capacity of our Dortmund facility. We wanted to get that up to managing around about 40,000 samples a year, or with the ability to manage 40,000 samples a year, of which we would utilize approximately 30,000. And we stated that we would get there by the end of 2023. In fact, we're there already.
Wow!
The guys are at that capacity, delivering full throttle as we speak. But importantly, we also said we would invest in an extension to our BD team, primarily out of the US. Actually, what we've done is we've built a critical mass now of BD professionals in the US, 2 more heads than we originally suggested that we would, and we now have absolutely hands down a world-class BD team driving programs into our Dortmund facility. Is it sufficient to accommodate or to win within the market segment that we're currently in? Yes, and I think we can see ourselves progressing faster than our competitors in that segment. We anticipate, actually, with this year's full full year's results, we will be somewhere like second or third in that market, and maybe even dominate about 12% of that market come the following year. But of course, there are adjacent segments. And adjacent segments that we're starting to butt into, and we're starting to look at and consider as they may offer opportunities for growth. And if that were the case, we did step into another segment, then I think we would probably need to think about bolstering capacity of our Dortmund facility further, or another facility, as well as building out further the BD team.
You must be getting sort of inbound inquiries now as well, I'm guessing, because you've done a lot of, I mean, there's been so many good news, contract news. I mean, we had another one this morning, obviously, with one of the Google subsidiaries, etc. So, you know, with all that sort of like being publicized across the industry, and the people then seeing the reference sites and also the benefits that they're effectively, maybe their rivals or other, you know, therapeutic areas are getting benefits, then presumably you're starting to get inbound inquiries as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, much of our inbound comes through academic publications. We're very active in collaborating with particularly pharma companies and also academic health science centers, and pushing out work into peer-reviewed journals. And so we do get inbound from that work. It's incredibly helpful in supporting the funnel, but it's certainly an area that we could be maybe more efficient. And to that end, as we work through a strategy process that will ultimately lead to a new 3 to 5 year strategy, having completed the last 3 year strategy at the back end of last year, there will be some new brand assets that we will release into the market, and I'm sure that will again improve the efficiency of our BD machine.
And alongside the sort of like the stellar organic growth, the sort of opportunities, are there also some M&A angle here at all, or is it really just going to be full bore on like for like?
I think there's some development that we can do in house, and you know, that's really balancing the demand from our pharma customers to deliver yesterday, versus, you know, having the team work on its own internal organic development. But there is some programs that we're currently pursuing at this point in time that will come to market and support revenue in the not too distant future. Of course, as a leadership team, we've demonstrated ourselves capable of not just identifying appropriate acquisition targets, but also integrating those targets effectively into the organization in a very short period of time. And so we are actively looking at other opportunities that would be synergistic or aligned with the current service that we're delivering, and offering our customers more value than we currently are.
And sort of like supporting the this sort of like really fast growth trajectory, both organic and potentially inorganic too. Might the board sort of consider strengthening the balance sheet at some point in time, sort of raising more capital?
I don't think there's a need to do that at this point in time. We have got a very robust forecast that keeps our balance sheet in rude health. But if there were opportunities, in particular alongside an acquisition to support the growth of the company, of course the board would consider those opportunities, and in so doing, engage some of our shareholders in that discussion.
Yeah, and then just sort of, I know it's a much smaller part of the business, but just moving on to sort of the products, the early CDT lung cancer test. Do you want to say just a couple of words on that, just to cover it off?
Sure. So our IDX lung program, run out of Southampton and Leeds, is in the process of onboarding a third site up in the north of England, as yet to be announced, but have now recruited and and have within the study 815 participants. Our Norfolk and Waveney work, which was a large pilot, about 2,000 tests performed, that on the face of it looks to be incredibly positive, is just finishing its third-party evaluation or independent analysis of the data, and we are actively engaged in commissioning discussions at this point in time ahead of the new financial year within the NHS. And you will remember also that there is a CCG not too far from Norfolk and Waveney that is also contracted to perform a similar sort of evaluation, and we expect them to kick off that evaluation in the next couple of months. So we continue to press hard, building from the ground up in the UK, and of course in the US. We still have a strong relationship with Biodesics, who, despite the fact that they have been substantially affected by COVID, selling into the same clinicians as have been at the front line, at the coalface of the COVID response, see EarlyCDT lung as the foundation stone from which the rest of their products and therefore the company is built. And so it's absolutely critical to their success in the market, and they continue to reaffirm that. Good.
And then just on the just a bit on the why the company's decided to move its accounting reference date just from May to August. Seems a strange one, but
yeah, no, it's an important question. We've struggled with this a little bit over the last 2 years as we've been building this pharma service business, because actually pharma services or outhouse services are relatively seasonal. Pharma companies, pharma executives tend to buy services at the beginning of their financial year and just before the end of their financial year. And their financial year tends to be a calendar year financial year. So you find January through April, there's a spate of buying, and then November, December, before the budget gets taken off them again, pharma execs tend to also want to buy services, which, given our sales cycle and in fact the way in which under IFRS 15 we recognize revenue, means that come the end of our financial year, we have just gone and built up a substantial order book which we're unable to deliver against and recognize revenue from. So it makes absolute sense to extend the financial year to 31 August, allowing us time to not only have contracted that revenue, but also recognized it through our Dortmund facility, contracting and recognizing within the same financial year.
Right, good. And then just finally, sort of like the possible news flow going forward, sort of for the next 3 to 6 months.
Contracts.
Yeah, well, you're definitely hitting the ball.
You know, that's what we're doing, and we're going to be doing a lot more of it. There's a number of contracts that are currently being signed, or indeed we're getting the wording right on an RNS. So are at the tipping point now, and we'll be bringing those to our shareholders in the coming days and days and weeks. We very much see that we will be starting our new financial year with a substantial order book, far more substantial than the order book that we started this financial year with, which gives the board real confidence in this business continuing to build, but through 2023 and beyond.
And how, just typically, how big is a contract and duration, sort of like scale?
Yeah, so I mean, it can be anywhere between sort of £50,000 and 1.5 million pounds, and it can, it can take us, as little as 4 weeks and as much as 8 months to deliver. Very typically, we start, particularly with our big pharma engagements, with a small contract, which gives them confidence in the science and our ability to manage the data and present appropriate deliverables back to them. Before that then moves on to a larger contract, deepening our relationship, but equally cross-selling into other groups that, whilst that the original contract might not pertain to their therapeutic area or indeed the asset that they manage the life cycle of, are equally interested in the output and want to put that to good use.
And what sort of scale is the order book will be at the end of the year in terms of, I don't know, percentage of your revenues or something like that, just as a feel, just to give people?
So I think we would feel very comfortable going into the new financial year with 30+% already booked. I think most service companies look to have about 30% under their belt to feel a degree of confidence on day one that the forecast on day 365 is achievable.
Well, so you're certainly knocking the ball out with the number of contracts you signed, and they're coming out sort of every single week. So keep up the great work there, Adam, and very best of luck. The momentum really seems to be with you guys, sort of heading from H1 into H2. So really look forward to hearing how the business progresses going forward. So thank you.
Thanks, Paul.